Hi and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to rack up a huge number of kills on this map without breaking a sweat. Grab a cup of tea or whatever you think fits War Thunder best, and let's dive into how to play here. As you probably know, most players mindlessly brawl in the town at the center of the map. And what does that mean for us? That's right, we're going to hold the right flank. At the start, you have two ways to play, a highly defensive, almost passive approach, or a more active one that is obviously riskier. We'll start with the more aggressive option. Always keep an eye on this area. On very rare occasions, a fast enemy tank can reach a position where it can catch us out before we get into cover. It happens in maybe 1 out of 100 battles, but it does happen. Secondly, we need to control the enemy hill in sector F7. This is a much more common position, and you'll run into opponents here far more often. Now we just stop near this hill, which will be our main cover for the opening of the match. Our goal here is to gather some intel so we can figure out how to proceed. First of all, we need to be ready for the enemy to push us. In 9 cases out of 10, they will be coming from the right side of the building directly in front of us. If the enemy isn't pushing us, we need to figure out whether someone is hiding behind the buildings in front of us. Usually you can hear enemy vehicles clearly, so this shouldn't be a problem. If there's no immediate threat nearby, we start controlling the area to our left. There are 4 key spots here where enemies can show up in the first couple of minutes while the fight for the center of the map is still going on. In the first area I've marked, there may be an enemy trying to hit our teammates on point B from the side. The second area is an open field that fast tanks love to use to rush into a position where they can pick off our teammates as they come out of the spawn. The third zone is the archway in the building, and the fourth zone is the gap between the 2 buildings. I'll leave you with a short example of how I play this position. Next, we move into Phase 2 and start pushing. But first, let's go over the full-on defensive setup, since we'll be following the same routine when it's time to attack. I use the defensive game plan either on slow tanks or when I just don't feel like diving into the fight. Right at the start, we need to get to the field in Sector F3 to try and intercept any enemies heading straight for Sector D5. Guys, there's no point staying here more than 10 to 15 seconds. If you don't catch anyone, it's better to move straight to our main spot in Sector G4. Here's our main spot for the first phase of the match. Basically, we're controlling almost the same sectors as from the more aggressive position, but this spot has its own pros and cons. On the plus side, we're in excellent cover, and if we play carefully, we'll be almost untouchable. The downside is, if the enemy pushes from the right flank, we have nowhere to fall back. If you start the match in Sector G6 and get heavily pushed, you can try to retreat to this position, but if you start the match here, there's no fallback. Playing this spot is really easy and there aren't any special tricks you need to know. Just keep an eye on your surroundings, play carefully, and try to deal some damage to the enemy. Phase 2 of the battle is pure chaos, and it all depends on whether the enemy is holding the flank or not. The problem is, once we push into the enemy half of the map, They could be hiding behind literally any hill, and you're going to need a bit of luck here. Our goal is to make it to Sector C3. Once we reach this spot, the enemy is in serious trouble. From this hill, we have an amazing view of their spawn, and if you're in position and play it right, the enemy won't even have a chance to leave their spawn. By the way, if we're playing the defensive strategy, the goal is the same. Stop the enemy push, then hit W and push straight to Sector C3. The downside of this spot is that enemy helicopters can take you out really easily. If you spot a flying menace, you can drop down the hill a bit to the left. You'll have worse vision of their spawn, but at least you'll have some cover from air attacks. By the way, if for some reason only known to you and God you're playing tanks with poor gun depression, play this spot from below. From there, you won't have to fully expose yourself just to get enough gun depression to aim. Honestly, this position is absolutely monstrous. If we survive the first phase, we can literally wipe the entire enemy team. Guys, before we move to the other side, I just want to say a few words. First of all, I really appreciate you sticking with me even though I'm uploading videos less often than before. I'll be honest, these days I spend almost all my free time on War Thunder. But with every new guide, it's getting harder and harder to get the map I need for recording clips. At one point, I even thought about making videos on an empty map. I spent a couple of hours recording and editing, but when I watched the final result, it looked terrible, and I just couldn't post something I didn't like myself. Anyway, I want to apologize for not being able to release a lot of content due to its specific nature, and I really want to thank all of you for sticking around and watching this channel. And of course, a special thanks to the absolute legends who hit the join button and became channel members. I truly appreciate and value your support. Thank you. The other side is much simpler, I'd even say a bit primitive. We'll be playing in Sector F6. I'm sure you understand. If we let a flank push through and the enemy reaches Sector C3, the game is basically lost, so I'm taking the dirty work on myself. We have two routes. The first is safe. We just drive through the low ground, stay completely hidden behind the terrain, and make our way to Sector F6. The second option is riskier. You can try to take the hill on the right to win a duel against the guy holding the field in Sector F3, just like I showed when we were playing on the other side. Our goal is to take position near the hill and stop any enemy flankers. Here's an important thing to remember. Sometimes you can hear an enemy on a fast vehicle arriving and hiding behind a building. Keep in mind, you can always shoot through the window to hit them. From this spot near the hill, we're doing basically the same thing as on the other side. We're playing a completely mirrored game, looking for enemies on the right in the same positions we checked before. I usually stay here for about 15 to 20 seconds. That's usually enough time for the enemy's slow tanks to reach the flank so we can meet them in cover instead of catching them while they're moving across the enemy half of the map. Once we've cleared the enemies on the flank, we need to move to sector G3. It's really important to watch the hill in sector E2 and keep an eye on the field in F3. Those are spots some players love to hold. Once we're in G3, we'll have a great view of the enemy spawn exit. And if our tank has good gun depression, we can climb the hill and get a direct line of sight on the enemy spawn itself. As I said, the topside is played as simply as possible, but it's effective. I hope you picked up something useful from this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.